and Bobby Charlton are an indispensable part of England's 1966 World Cup legend. Despite their shared roots and mutual passion for the game, the nation's most famous sporting brothers were destined to grow apart. Few would have predicted how far.
The split screen tells the whole story. On one side, Jack Charlton in a hospital bed, and on the other, his funeral, a devastating end for a man who gave everything to the beautiful game. Big Jack, the indestructible defender who won the World Cup for England and became a national hero in Ireland, spent his final years unable to remember the very moments that made him a legend. The cruel irony is almost too much to bear, but this is not just a story of loss. It is a story of courage, legacy, and how one man's suffering helped change football forever. Jack Charlton was not just any footballer, he was a titan. For 23 years at Leeds United, he made a club record 773 appearances. He was the kind of centre-half who seemed carved from stone, physically imposing and seemingly immune to pain. He was not about fancy footwork, he was a fortress. Then came 1966, the year that defined English football. Jack was part of the team that won the World Cup, standing shoulder to shoulder with his brother Bobby as England conquered the world. After his playing days, he became manager of the Republic of Ireland from 1986 to 1996, transforming a struggling team into a force that captured hearts across the nation. He fished the rivers of Mayo, drank Guinness with the fans, and stood on the touchline like a protective giant. The put-him-under-pressure era was built entirely on his personality, resilient, direct, unshakable. If you want to see more stories like this and support the channel, hit the hype button right now and give this video some love. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more content like this. But even titans can fall. The first real warning came in August 2009. Jack was 74 years old and on a family holiday in Mascaret on the Costa Blanca in Spain. He had been complaining about problems with his vision. Then he collapsed. His son John later said Jack had suffered a turn and felt really unwell. The family rushed him to a private clinic in Benidorm. The immediate fear was a stroke, one of the most common catastrophic events for men his age. For 3 days, he stayed in hospital while Spanish doctors ran every test they could. MRI scans, CAT scans, the works. In the end, they put it down to extreme heat, travel fatigue, and high blood pressure. He was given medication to bring his blood pressure down and sent home. The family played it down publicly, protecting the image of the Iron Giant. But looking back, it was a sign. The man who had played through injuries for over 2 decades was now vulnerable. 3 years later, in March 2012, came the incident that truly shattered his independence. Jack was 76. He was at home in Northumberland, and the house had a staircase that his son John described as a bit tricky and awkward. Late one night, Jack fell. He was alone. Pat, his wife, was out. Unable to stand because of how badly he was hurt, the World Cup winner had to crawl across the floor to reach the phone and call for help. Imagine that moment, a man who had stood tall in front of 100,000 people at Wembley, now dragging himself along the ground just to summon help. He was taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, where doctors confirmed he had broken his hip. Hip fractures in older people are serious. They often mark the beginning of a steep decline. Jack had surgery and it went well, but the recovery forced him to stay still for weeks. For a man who had spent his life in motion, that stillness was a prison. Then came the aneurysm. A blood vessel in his body had ballooned dangerously and needed surgery to prevent it from bursting. The operation saved his life, but what followed took something else from him. As part of his recovery, Jack had to undergo memory tests to see if he was still fit to drive. He failed. His driving license was taken away. For most people, losing a license is an inconvenience. For Jack Charlton, it was devastating. Driving was his freedom. He would head out to remote fishing spots, shooting grounds, and visit friends across the north of England whenever he wanted. The car was his escape. Now he had to rely on Pat and his children to take him anywhere. He could no longer just decide to leave. He had to ask. He had to wait. That loss of independence is one of the hardest things for anyone to face, and for Jack, it marked the beginning of a new kind of battle. By 2017, people who knew Jack well started to notice something was wrong. Andy Townsend, a former Ireland captain who had played under him, attended a reunion at the K Club in County Kildare. He said, Jack was clearly struggling. The sharpness was gone. The man who could recall every detail of a match from 30 years ago was now lost in the fog. When filmmakers Gabriel Clarke and Pete Thomas approached the family to make a documentary. They quickly realised they could not do a normal interview. Jack could no longer hold a conversation about his career with any accuracy. His memory was slipping away, and with it, the stories that had made him who he was. The documentary, Finding Jack Charlton, captured the heartbreaking reality of his condition. One of the most painful moments was discovering that Jack could not remember winning the World Cup. He was one of only 11 men who started in the 1966 final against West Germany, the greatest achievement in English football history. Yet, when shown footage of the game or pictures of himself holding the trophy, his face was blank. Director Gabriel Clark said Jack needed to be reminded about what he had achieved. There was old footage of a younger, sharper Jack giving an after-dinner speech, joking about a goal his brother Bobby scored in the 1966 tournament. Jack claimed he gave Bobby the assist, shouting about a 35-yard strike. The audience laughed. But in his final years, Jack was the one who did not remember. Ireland loved Jack Charlton. When he first arrived in Dublin in 1986, some fans were hostile. There was even a banner that read, "Go home, Union Jack." But he won them over completely, becoming a beloved figure who helped the nation believe in itself. Yet, when his wife Pat asked him during filming, "They think a lot of you in Ireland, do they not?" Jack just stared and said, "I have no idea." The entire emotional journey from outsider to St. Jack had been erased from his mind. But not everything was gone. The brain holds on to emotional memories longer than factual ones. This was shown beautifully in a moment involving Paul McGrath. McGrath had been one of Jack's players, a man of immense talent but fragile confidence. Jack had been like a father to him, protecting him during his struggles with alcohol. During the documentary, Jack was shown a video of McGrath on an iPad. His face lit up instantly. "Paul McGrath," he said with genuine warmth. McGrath later spoke about that moment, saying it broke his heart, but also showed that Jack understood he was loved. The facts were gone, but the feelings remained. Behind the scenes, the toll on the family was immense. Pat Charlton had been Jack's partner for over 60 years. In his final years, she became his anchor. The documentary shows her managing his confusion, guiding him through the house, giving him the constant reassurance he needed. She spoke openly about the shift, how the man who had conquered the world now needed constant care. It was relentless. Dementia does not just affect the patient, it affects everyone around them. The filmmakers also discovered something deeply moving during production. They found a stash of handwritten notes that Jack had made. These notes suggested he knew what was happening to him. He was writing things down, trying to hold on to thoughts before they disappeared. It shows a man fighting back, even as his mind betrayed him. The family was open during the making of the film, but they set clear boundaries. They did not want pity. They wanted the film to show Jack still living his life as best he could. Although the directors were invited to film the funeral, they chose not to use the footage. The final goodbye belonged to the family alone. In 2019, Jack faced another blow. He was diagnosed with lymphoma, a cancer of the blood. For someone already battling advanced dementia, this was unbearable. The cancer brought pain, exhaustion, and confusion, on top of everything else. On July 10th, 2020, Jack Charlton passed away at his home in Northumberland. He was 85 years old. His family was with him. The official cause of death was lymphoma and dementia. His death came during the global pandemic, so the large public gatherings that usually follow the death of such a legend were not possible. But the love poured out anyway. In Ireland, the response was extraordinary. Radio stations across the country coordinated to play Put 'Em Under Pressure at 12:30 on the day of his funeral. The song, an anthem of Italia 90, became a hymn of remembrance. In Ballina, County Mayo, where Jack had spent so many hours fishing, a massive mural was unveiled. Crowds gathered for a minute of silence, treating him as one of their own. Paul McGrath said Jack had become a father figure to him and to us all. The outpouring of emotion showed just how deeply Jack had touched Irish life. He was an Englishman who became more Irish than many who were born there. His legacy in Ireland went beyond football. He gave a nation confidence at a time when it needed it most. The late 1980s and early 1990s were transformative years for Irish identity, and Jack was at the heart of that transformation. He showed Ireland that they could compete on the world stage. He showed them they could win. More than that, he showed them they belonged. The scenes of Irish fans in Italia 90 singing and celebrating were as much about Jack's belief in them as their own talent. He built a team, but he also built a dream. But Jack's story does not end with his death. it connects to something much bigger and far more troubling. 5 members of the 1966 World Cup starting team have been diagnosed with or died from brain diseases. Jack Charlton had dementia and lymphoma and died in 2020. Nobby Stiles suffered from advanced dementia and died in 2020. Ray Wilson lived with Alzheimer's disease and died in 2018. Martin Peters had dementia and died in 2019. And in a twist that made the tragedy even more painful, Sir Bobby Charlton, Jack's own brother, was diagnosed with dementia. The news became public in November 2020, just months after Jack died. Jack and Bobby had a difficult relationship for much of their adult lives, marked by distance and tension, but in the end, they were united by the same cruel disease. The image of the 2 greatest English footballers of their generation, brothers, both losing their minds to the same condition, forced the country to face an uncomfortable truth. Football had likely cost them their memories. This cluster of cases could not be ignored. It led to serious scientific research. The field study, led by Dr. Willie Stewart at the University of Glasgow, analysed health records of over 7,600 former professional footballers. The results were shocking. Former players are 3.5 times more likely to die of brain diseases than the general public. The risk of Alzheimer's disease is 5 times higher. The risk of motor neurone disease is 4 times higher. The risk of Parkinson's disease is 2 times higher. The study also found that defenders, like Jack Charlton, had the highest risk. Goalkeepers had no higher risk than average. This pointed directly to one thing: heading the ball. The findings sent shockwaves through the football world. For decades, heading had been considered a fundamental skill, taught to children from their earliest days in the sport. Nobody questioned it. Nobody thought it could be dangerous. But the data was undeniable. The very act that made defenders like Jack so valuable, the ability to win headers and clear danger, was slowly destroying their brains. It was a betrayal by the sport they loved. The game that gave them everything was also taking everything away. The statistics were not just numbers. They represented real people, real families, and real suffering. For years, people assumed the problem was only the old heavy leather balls that got soaked with water. But Dr. Stewart explained that modern balls, while lighter, are kicked much harder and faster. The force of impact on the brain can be just as dangerous. It is basic physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. A light ball moving fast hits just as hard as a heavy ball moving slow. Jack Charlton's suffering was not in vain. By allowing his decline to be documented, and because his illness mirrored that of his teammates, awareness was raised. Football was forced to confront the damage it had been doing to its players for decades. New rules were introduced. Children are now limited in how much heading practice they can do. Clubs and federations have been pushed to take brain health seriously. Jack's story became a warning that could not be ignored, and that is his final legacy. He was a defender his whole life. On the pitch, he defended his goal. As a manager, he defended his players. And in his final years, through the visibility of his condition, he defended future generations. The cruel irony remains. The man who created unforgettable memories for England and Ireland lost his own. But the world will not forget what he gave: his courage, his passion, his unshakable spirit, and most importantly, the awareness his suffering brought to a sport that desperately needed to change. Jack Charlton may have forgotten who he was, but millions will never forget what he meant. If this story moved you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your memories of Big Jack or your thoughts on how football is changing to protect its players. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.